Hi everyone, it's me. Have a seat, get cozy, put your feet up. Today we are being brutally honest about the UK. So if that is going to upset you, maybe don't watch this video. I've got a hot cuppa. I painted this mug, isn't it cute? I got a hot cuppa. I've got some questions about living in the UK. So let's get into it. In case you're new here, hi, how's it going? My name is Alanna and I'm a Canadian, but I live here in the UK. I've been here for 9 years, which is, every time I say that out loud, it doesn't sound real. Anywho, how about this one to start us off? What's real British weather like and how do you cope with it? I guess if we're thinking like worldwide, I'm very grateful that the UK has 4 seasons, right? Very distinct 4 seasons. Not everybody gets that and I like that. Unfortunately, the extremes are difficult. So I've never liked winter as a Canadian. Never liked winter. Winter in the UK is just as bad, if not slightly worse than winter in Canada, if you can believe it. It's so dark. It's so dark and wet and depressing. We're just kind of coming out of my 9th winter here. Not my favorite. I am not a fan. In Canada, we get a lot more snow, which is annoying to deal with. But I feel like there's more light, there's more brightness typically. And the other extreme would be summertime. I was always a summertime girly, yay. But not when there's no aircon like here. So the summertime here can be really tough. I still kind of struggle. It's not as bad because I've gotten used to it, but when you've spent your whole life in air conditioning, at work, at home, everywhere, air conditioning in the summertime, you don't really conceptualize, you don't really realize how much you rely on it. So here, this flat, I love this flat, historic old flat, probably haunted, more on that later. It has been built to retain heat. So in the summertime, there will be days when I'm upstairs in the office at my desk, maybe editing a video, and I'm actively sweat is falling off my body onto my chair, and there's been some summers when we've had a heat wave where I will get a tea towel, like a kitchen tea towel, soak it in cold water, put it around my neck and my shoulders while I'm sat working at my desk. That is a thing I've had to do. So what is real British weather like? It's something. What's the biggest cultural difference between Canadians and the British? I would say, so I live in Kent. I don't know if you can see my Kent art. I live in Kent. I deal with Southerners, all right? And Northerners always love to tell me that they are very different, and that's cool. I love that for you. Southerners, I find, are fairly reserved. They're fairly, they don't want to be a bother. I think that's what it comes down to mainly. They don't want to be a bother. They don't want to be annoying to you. They want to be polite. So a bit more reserved, a bit more closed off, not in a snobbish way, which kind of was my interpretation early on. And of course there are people who are snobs, of course, but now that I've been here for so long, I don't see it in a snob way. I see it in like, they really don't want to be a bother. Whereas I find traditionally, stereotypically, Canadians are much more open, they're much more friendly, and it always kind of surprises me. There was a time when I went back home and I was in the queue for something, like in a shop, and this woman just started chatting to me, like, not how's the weather, kind of polite small talk that you would hear from a British person, but she just started talking, like, and we were just like talking, like deep conversation with a total stranger. And I know Northerners tell me that they do that all the time, and that's great. Here I find not so much. And it's always surprising going back to Canada. Or like there's a time my partner and I, we signed up to a gym when we were going to be in Canada, and you could get like a discounted week trial. So we did that. And there's this old boy there, and he just started chatting to us. And we had a lovely conversation, and every time it happens, I'm always just a little bit surprised. Is there a preference? I think both are nice in their own right. They're both very nice. That's the thing too, right? I guess here in the UK, I find it really hard to make connections with people and to make friends because people are a bit more reserved and a bit more standoffish. Just striking up an in-depth conversation with a stranger doesn't really happen for me. Whereas in Canada, I feel like people are just much more open to that, and it's easier to make connections with people. What are some traditional British foods or dishes I should try? Is everything an acceptable answer? I love trying new things. I love food as well. So trying new things and food kind of go hand in hand. I have a whole playlist on my YouTube channel of taste tests and trying British food. Recent ones that come to mind, trying English wine, trying cheap, mid, and expensive British cheese. I've tried as many different British snacks as humanly possible. There's a lot. And personally, I love the trying. I love the experience, right? Of like, I don't know what this is and I'm gonna try it. So there's obviously some very big, like famous ones I think are a no-brainer. A fry-up, like an English breakfast, a Sunday roast, sausage rolls, pork pies, you know, like Scotch egg. The really like famous stuff I think needs to come first. But then there's so many other things, like going to I love crisps and going to like the crisp aisle and just like buying stuff to try. Genuinely so much fun. And every year I get a little bit nervous that I'm like, there's nothing that I haven't tried yet. Like I've tried everything and now this experience is done for me and I'm like, oh my God. And then I go out to a different grocery store or even my usual and I take a gander and I take a wander and it's like, oh, I've never seen this before. It never ends. And for that, I'm very grateful. So that's my advice to literally everyone, just try. Because you never know. And realistically, try it twice. Try it twice in 2 separate occasions because sometimes the first time you have it, not a great experience, but the second time, that's the right one. When it comes to food, I am a busy person. I'm a busy person and I have never missed a meal. I have some friends who are like, wow, it's just been such a busy day, I've forgotten to eat. Literally don't know what that's like. But some days when I'm really busy, like on a filming day, when I'm filming and I'm editing and I've got a deadline, I'm like really stuck into my work. I need to eat, period. I need to eat, but I don't want to go to the shops. I don't want to cook anything. And I also don't really want to snack just on unhealthy stuff all day. Enter today's sponsor, YFood. For me personally, I love YFood for lunch on those really busy days. It's a ready to drink meal. It's got protein, it's got vitamins, it's got no added sugar. And if you love taste tests as much as I do, may I suggest their taster pack. You'll get 5 of their best-selling flavors. You can try, see which ones you like more. They have 26 essential vitamins and minerals. Great. Personally, my favorite is the cold brew coffee. It is genuinely, it tastes good. Like, I don't know what to say. I love a cold brew, especially coming into like this sort of spring, summertime. I don't really like hot coffees that much. Cold brew, absolutely. So the fact that I can have a cold brew that tastes good, has protein and vitamins, and it keeps me full for hours. Like, what else can I ask for? If you want to try it yourself, maybe do a cheeky little taste test, you can use code Alanna-YouTube to get 10% off, not just the taster packs, but whatever you like, excluding subscriptions. But thanks to YFood for sponsoring this video. If you want to give them a try, do a little taste test, make sure you use my code and there'll be a link in the description. How does the British sense of humor differ from North American humor? So I would say North American, we should space out or like separate. I think there's a spectrum. You've got British, Canadian, American. American and British, different. Canada is kind of like, it absorbs a lot of different cultures and a lot of different like characteristics of other nationalities and of other countries. So Canada is kind of like an amalgamation of British and American. I would say British sense of humor can be very dark, very self-deprecating, sarcastic, dry. It's hard to explain, but when you see it, you know it. Whereas I think Canadian humor is similar, but perhaps not as dark, not as self-deprecating or depressing, but kind of, just not as severe. And then Americans, I don't know how you describe American sense of humor. If you've ever watched any of their like TV shows, comedy panel, they don't want to do comedy panel, but like comedy, late night shows, SNL type stuff, it's definitely not as self-deprecating self-deprecating. It's funny, obviously. Everybody's funny. It's just like a different variation. How does the public transportation system work in the UK? So there's a couple of different systems. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty, but one big change over the last couple of years has been the transition to cashless, which is just beautiful. That was a chef kiss, if you didn't know what that was. So when I moved here in 2015, 2016, I think even 2017, I would take the bus. So I was what they would call a bus wanker. I would take the bus, and back then for us in Kent, everyone's gonna be different. It was cash only, and you needed to have as close to perfect change as you could possibly imagine. And my understanding was, or at least the excuse that I got from all of the bus drivers, is that they weren't really given like a float, or at least they were given a very minimal float. So you were expected to pay for your ticket, know how much it was gonna be, and have close to perfect change. And I absolutely hated it. And when I moved here and I was buying my bus tickets, there'd be a queue, right? There's always a queue in the morning. Everyone's trying to get to work, and I'd have all these coins, and I didn't know what the coin was just by sight. I would have to read each individual coin. And it's one of those things that you don't really think about until you're in that situation, because yeah, I couldn't identify the coins based on sight. That shouldn't be surprising. Why would I know the coins? You can't use them in Canada. But in those situations, it was just awful. Horrible. Hated it. I angered many a bus driver with poor change. Thankfully, after COVID, a lot of the buses have become cashless. I think you can still pay with cash. Like, I think that's still possible. But I know at least for us here in Kent, you can buy a ticket. So I have the app on my phone. I can buy the ticket. I can house the ticket on my phone. I can show the bus driver my ticket. I don't have to print anything. I don't have to have perfect change. And it's just like so much easier. When it comes to the trains, I do the same thing. I buy my train ticket on my phone. I house the ticket on my phone. I scan it rather than showing it to anybody. You scan it at the barriers at the train station. So you scan it to get in, you scan it to get out. Simple. And I'm so grateful, because those first few years using cash only, terrible. I still get night sweats. By comparison, in Canada, I had used public transport in my entire life maybe 4 times, and it was only ever to take the train to Toronto for like an event or a concert. Every other time I was walking or I was driving. Canada is a driving country. If you don't have a car, if you don't have a license, it's extremely isolating. It's a big country, and like there's no way, even for me, in high school working at a part-time job, I couldn't take the bus to work. So I had to have someone drive me, or I had to drive myself. There was a period when I would ride my bike to my job, and that was very short-lived. But there's no way that you can adequately use public transport unless you live in a big city. But for most Canadians living in a town or a village, like, you have to drive. What's the deal with the NHS, especially compared to Canada's healthcare? So I'm not gonna pretend to know all the intricacies of both healthcare systems, because thankfully I haven't had to use them much. Knock on wood. From my understanding, they are very similar in that they are free at the point of use. So when I go to the doctor here in England, I'm registered with a local GP. I don't have to pay to go see my doctor. I don't have to pay for an appointment. And the same is true in Canada. If something happens and I had to call an ambulance, I'm not having to pay for that ambulance in England or in Canada. It's America that's the real different one. That's the like pay per use kind of situation. But Canada, like humor, you got the UK, you've got America. Canada is kind of in the middle, but more similar to the UK system. And the fun fact, being a foreigner, maybe British people don't know, but as a foreigner, every time you apply for a UK visa or you renew your current visa, you have to pay the NHS surcharge. So it is a lump sum of money that goes towards the NHS every single time. Every time renew visa, You pay the NHS surcharge, but you're also gonna pay taxes, of course. So I pay taxes through working and whatever. For my 10-year anniversary, I was hoping to add up all of my visa costs and my NHS surcharges, because yeah, well over 10,000 plus, I gotta say. It's a hefty price every single time. How fun! Is it expensive to live in the UK compared to Canada? I feel a little bit out of the loop when it comes to Canadian costs, because the last time I lived in Canada, I was 22 living at home. And things are very different now than they were back then. But I think both countries, you know, we're not immune to a cost of living crisis. Things are expensive. And that sucks. The same loophole in both countries exists. If you live in a less than desirable place, it will be cheaper than a more desirable place. That is a concept that exists everywhere. My problem and the situation I've put myself into is where I live in Kent. London is pricing people out. People can't afford to live in London anymore, so they're coming outwards. And many are coming into Kent, which is making Kent more expensive. But the same thing is happening back home where I live outside of Toronto, or I'm from outside of Toronto, and where Toronto is getting more and more expensive and it's pricing people out, they're coming further and further out. And so they're making like my hometown and where I'm from more and more expensive. And so you're sort of pushing everybody out, and then the rest of us are having to go like more rural and like further and further away so you can afford it. So that sucks. And there's no end in sight. How easy is it to make friends and integrate into British society? Integrate? Yes, easy. And I think all foreigners, here's my hot take. I don't know if this is a hot take. I think if you move to a country, you are a foreigner in that country, it is your job to assimilate to that country. Now, does that mean strip away everything that you are to become a new person? No. I am still Canadian, still sound Canadian. I still do things largely in a Canadian way, but I work really hard to assimilate into my community. You know, I want to be a positive part in this place, and I don't expect the UK to change to suit me. I need to change to suit the UK. That's just my personal opinion. So I think integrating is absolutely vital, and it also, I think, helps you. Like if you resist, like, oh, I hate how British people do that, and like you resisting, I think you just will never feel at home. Now, how easy is it to make friends? It's not great, but I also think that's a me problem. Ever since lockdown, I've worked from home. I don't see people. I see this, I see you, this camera, my computer, this house. So ever since lockdown, it's been tough, and the opportunity to meet people has become smaller and smaller. But that's like I think culturally it's probably happening to a lot of people, but it's also kind of a me problem. I think you really have to put yourself out there and push yourself to be out there. No one's gonna find you in your house. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, definitely in the last like 5 years, meeting people, difficult. So you really have to try, I think, at least. Maybe if you're like super extroverted, you don't have to try. I don't know that life. Any tips for understanding the British accent and local slang? So we know the British accent doesn't exist. Okay, I think we all know that. But we all understand the question. My answer would be it takes time. The longer you are here, the less you will hear. And that is a really weird experience, and you won't notice it at first until maybe somebody points it out. So for me, I don't hear accents anymore. My partner, to me, who is English, no longer has an accent. My friends, people in my community, I don't hear those accents anymore. When I first moved here, it kind of felt like I was in a movie because everybody sounded really strange, and I felt so like alienated because it's like all of these people sound weird. And now, 9 years later, I don't hear them anymore. And I don't know when that happened, but it happened. It's only when I hear a voice that I don't hear in my day-to-day life that it stands out. So my partner and I were out for a walk, and we were walking through a park, and this woman was speaking to her kids, and she had like a northern accent. I don't know where it was, but it was not something that I heard, so it like stood out. I don't hear that voice on the day-to-day is what I mean. Does that make sense? Or I went to the post office and I was dropping stuff off, and the guy at the counter had like a Scottish accent. Again, broadly speaking, Scottish accent. I don't know exactly where, but I don't hear it on the day-to-day, and so it stood out. But the longer you are here, the less you will hear. And yeah, it's weird. How do you navigate the local driving rules, especially driving on the left? Driving here made me want to puke. And that is not an exaggeration. The first time I went out to practice driving here in England, I scratched a BMW. And I sobbed at the side of the road. That's a true story. The best thing I can recommend is, as a Canadian with a full license, I was able to exchange my license for a automatic British driving license, which means I can drive automatics in the UK right away, which kind of seems insane to me, but that is the rules technically, unless they change by the time I post this video. But the idea of just immediately getting in the car and just driving to work, I could not fathom. So what I did, and I would 100% recommend, and I'm gonna do it again. I don't have a car, I sold it. When I get a new car, I'm gonna do this, and it is refresher lessons. So I booked a guy, I wanna say I did maybe one session that was like 2 hours, called refresher lessons. So it's like you have a license, but you don't have the confidence, or you've maybe not driven here in a long time, like whatever. And I went out with this guy, and that was the first time like driving on the left and roundabouts and the speed and the rules and all that stuff. And it was wonderful. So if you are gonna drive here, if you have a full license and you can exchange it, great. I would do that, because then you don't have to do all the lessons and paying all that stuff. But definitely check out refresher lessons. It was wonderful. My guy was fabulous. I felt so much more confident. And then once you start driving, like you'll figure it out. But driving on the left is weird. There was one time I accidentally drove on the right side of the road, but we don't talk about that. How does the tipping culture in the UK differ from that in Canada? Largely speaking, in Canada, you tip for like every service. Hairdressers, restaurants, bars, all of that is expected. You're expected to tip. That is part of the culture. Here in the UK, it's kind of the opposite. Some restaurants, like I went out to dinner, and it was one of those places where I was paying by card, and so they just like plug in the number, they point the machine at you, you tap, there's no prompt to add a tip or anything, you just tap and you're like, okay, bye, have a great day. And you're just like, you don't even get the option. That's not the case for all places. Some places will be like, would you like to add a 10%, 15%, 20% tip? Okay, great. But in Canada, like if you don't tip, it's really, really rude. Where here, I think the understanding is like, if you've had great service, if you've really enjoyed your time, tip, great. But if you don't tip, like you're not gonna get attacked in the parking lot. Not that you get attacked in Canada either, but you know what I mean. Usually when I talk about tipping, British people are like, yeah, it's because we pay our workers a living wage. I don't know how true that is anymore. I don't know how much Canadians are getting paid comparatively, but the culture of it is that in Canada, you absolutely tip. Don't forget to check out YFood, link in the description, Alanna-YouTube. You're gonna get 10% off. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you have fun. Hope you're having a nice spring, I think technically. If you would like to watch something else, how about this one? I tried cooking wartime recipes, and it went about as well as you'd expect. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye!